Okay, so Watchmen Chapter 1, directed by Brandon Vietti, starring Titus Welliver, Katie Shakoff, and Troy Baker. And ever since they announced this movie back in, I think, Comic-Con last year, I've been super excited for it. And I know it's not even a theatrical release, it was a straight-to-video thing. But I'm such a huge Watchmen fan that I just couldn't help my excitement to revisit that world in an animation form. Which, talking about the animation, this type of animation, I know we've seen it before with the Into the Spider-Verse movies and the Telltale games and the What If series. It's very much like that, but it fits this story so well because it is, at the end of the day, a story based on a comic book, and it captures the art of Dave Gibbons so perfectly to the detail. It has this 3D models and they accentuate with 2D lines all over the models, and I really loved how it looked. I want to talk about the performances a little bit because I was wondering how well are they going to adapt the characters compared to the live action Zack Snyder movie, and it's inevitable to compare both versions of both movies because at the end of the day you're trying to adapt a quote-unquote unadaptable story, so you're really going to end up comparing them both. And I think for now, up until this point, I think I like Watchmen Chapter 1 better. I think it captures the story, the essence of the world, the look, the aesthetic of that alternate universe. I love that it felt like another world. In the Zack Snyder movie, it very much felt like our world, and in this one you could see the design of the cars are different. There's charging stations all over the city. They just perfectly establish this universe as another realm, another world, an alternate world, and it feels a lot like the comic. In terms of performances and characterizations, I really have to side with this version as well. And I think one of the best performances in this movie is Katie Shakoff's Lori. I really mean it. She gave Lori such depth. You could feel her pain. You could feel how frustrated she is of not being able to understand John and Dr. Manhattan, and just being extremely put off by the fact that she is essentially dating a god and she doesn't understand it. In Zack Snyder movie, she basically came across as very annoyed. It was very surface level type of shit, and I didn't feel her emotions. In this one, even though it's animated, it felt more human than in the live action version. Titus Welliver as Rorschach, he took a page out of Jack Earl Haley's book in terms of performing as Rorschach. Essentially, the voice is just a little bit more gravelly, like there's a little bit more of a growl to it. But whenever they cut back to the past, where he is supposed to be a little bit more sane and his voice is not as jagged as it is in the present, he made that distinction very noticeable in this film, as opposed to Jack Earl Haley's basically keeping the same tone throughout the entire story. And I feel that is a point in favor of this version of the character, and I just keep loving what they did with this. Although I really believe that they could have told the entirety of the Watchmen story in one movie. I don't think they had to split it in two, because at the end it's gonna end up being like two and a half hours of story, both chapters. And I think you could do that in one movie. I think you could do like a 3-hour movie and just make the entire thing. And across the board, man, I think I enjoyed every single performance in this movie, except for maybe the comedian. Comedian just felt a little bit over the top for me in terms of the characterization, how he's almost always gelling. I think that's the one I prefer. The Jeffrey Dean Morgan version way better in the Zack Snyder movie than this one. And just like in the comics, they introduced the Black Freighter side story going alongside the main story, which is the pirate thing they do in the comic. And I hated it in the comic and I hate it here. it brings the whole momentum of the story to a halt, and they try to keep it, to weave it into the movie as well as they can, and they do a really good job at it. But it felt it just feels like a little bit of a chore to get through, and I get why it's there. I understand its meaning. I just think I never liked it. I never did like the Black Freighters parts in the book. Majority of the people think the same way. But the movie finds a good way to weave it into the main story so it doesn't feel as much of a grinding halt. And it's coming. They are setting up the squid. They already talked about the island, the writers, the missing people, the scientists. They already talked about all of that. So they are definitely 100% doing the squids, and I cannot wait. It's just the best part. It's just such a comic book thing from the original story, and I want to see it come to life in the screen. Now, with everything Watchmen related, there is inevitably going to be some type of controversy because some people just really don't want to touch the Watchmen story. They just want it to remain a comic. They don't want it to be adapted. They don't want to see any other interpretation of it ever again, and I have to disagree with that take. I think the more exposure you give the story and this world, I just really want to see more Watchmen out there. I really do. It is just so a relevant story. It doesn't matter when you tell it, how you tell it, it will always remain relevant, and the characters are just so rich, and sadly not everyone is willing to pick up a 40-year-old comic book and read it. It doesn't matter how good the story is. So this is a good way to get that story out there to people who are not willing to just sit down and read a comic book. So yeah, I enjoy how they strip the characters from any type of flashiness or coolness. If you see these characters, these are sad, depressing, just overall hung up individuals in these fantasies that they created inside their heads. And if people really went out there and just started to dress up in these silly costumes, this is basically the type of individuals that would go out and do this type of shit. This movie gets the point of Watchmen. It gets the message. It tries to tell the story as closely and as faithful to the original text as possible. I really like how they interjected the supplemental material in the form of audio recordings. Like you can hear like an audiobook playing from the Hollis Mason Under the Hood stuff, and the Jenny Slater interview with Nova Express, and all those little bits of supplemental stuff. It's in there. It's in the movie in the form of audios, and I really like how they did that. I was wondering how they were gonna do that, and one of my thoughts was maybe they will do flashbacks to those events, but no, they kept it as audios from those recordings, and I loved it. Anyways guys, those are my thoughts on Watchmen Chapter 1. I am really excited to see how this story keeps developing in Chapter 2. Have you seen this movie? Please let me know down in the comments below. Remember to follow me at caffeines.prince98 on Instagram. I don't have Twitter because I hate it, and Facebook is for the memes. I'll catch you guys later. Peace.